The drought being experienced here is as a result of poor or the lack of rainfall due to climate change, and its effects continue to cause increased human suffering. 10 years ago, accessing the northern part of Kenya through the Marsabit-Moyale highway was a hellish nightmare due to a poor road network. Right now, the road is just a joy to drive on, and the sceneries, you're always tempted to take a stop and take some selfies. Sadly though, the livelihoods of the communities living in these regions hasn't changed much. The consequences of climate change are potentially more significant for the poor in developing countries than for those living in more prosperous nations because of low adaptive capacity and overdependence on natural resources such as land, grass, and water, and in this case, the pastoral communities of Marsabit County. Competition of these resources frequently leads to conflicts and sometimes even death.
Currently, we are in a very severe drought situation, arising from 3 consecutive failures of the rains. And the projection indicates that March rainfall, that's March, April, May, will also be below normal. So if that situation will obtain, then we'll have about 4 consecutive failure of the rain seasons. And currently, we project that 200,000 people require humanitarian assistance in the county, and about 4 sectors have been impacted by the drought situation. One of them being, livestock production, where there is no pasture, there is no water. Animals are trekking 40 to almost 50 kilometers of a return journey to water points. Animals have moved away from households, grazing areas, to far off places, and therefore it means children that are left behind have no access to milk, and malnutrition rates have already spiked. And the hotspots are in North Hor and Laisamis and parts of Moyale. We were also impacted in terms of conflict. There was a serious conflict between communities, and there are areas where we have pastures and water, but they cannot access.
With the current changes in climate, a lot of things have changed. And one thing which had really changed is the pattern of rain itself. We have erratic rainfall, and in terms of coverage, you'll see several spots are not covered at the same time. So these spots normally create a lot of movement of livestock and concentrate in one area. And by so doing, it's a disaster because within a very short time, they finish the vegetation, and so they are left vulnerable. So this is the kind of situation that we've been facing for the last probably around 10, 15 years. And so, the intensity of drought, historically, you would experience drought probably 1 season or 2 seasons, but the current one, because of this erratic nature of rainfall, is really unpredictable at all.
And there's no time, the resources are enough, no time. So, but the challenges we are experiencing now, there are some boreholes which has we call them hybrid borehole, whereby they use the solar and also the genset. And I will give you one example of those boreholes, Manyatelenkima borehole. It is using both. But the Infata, which produce power to the solar, has broke down 5 months ago. Being the representative, I was asking the other partners to come in, government to chip in, but up to now we have not succeeded, though we just got some hope that maybe someone donor might support it. So now my appeal to other humanitarian organizations to come in for repair of the borehole, support fuel, and also in case of any other breakages in those boreholes, they come in and assist.
Mary is a resident of Namare in Laisamis sub-county. She's on her way from fetching water at the only borehole for miles, serving over 1,000 residents and their livestock.
Korda sana na la tata weleng. Yule chakunto kupoki ngare nekwi.
Ile shida ambayo niko nayo, kitu ambayo inadetermine sana ni inadetermine mashida mingi ni maji.
Yule kata yata inere.
Wakati ule uko na maji?
Yata nda.
Wakati uko na chakula?
Tanemi yata nkare.
Na hauna maji.
Nada inongonda na ana jana taninya.
Hakuna vile unaweza kula.
Yule si na lotinga na le kamat. Lata itimea.
Na ile mahali ambapo tunapata maji inatumia mafuta.
Kora inelata na silingi nayo.
Hiyo mafuta bado inanunuliwa kwa pesa.
Nada ngapa mkolong.
Na sasa ni wakati wa kiangazi.
Sio mchina hata nina silingi ni.
Sisi tunapata pesa kutoka kwa mifugo ya kununua ile mafuta.
Kwa roide yosia.
Mifugo zimekonda sana.
Na tomates.
Na zimekufa pia.
Tanije kwete katua.
Ukienda kujaribu kuuza.
Ya mbungu ngaito kuna dona nimeri.
Ili upate ya kununua, ya kuuza, sorry.
Meitogi na 80 mamkesas.
Hakuna kwa sababu zimekonda, kwa hivyo haina pesa.
Ama dana yolbe angine soko, ipimet edin ingine.
Ukienda kupeleka mbuzi sokoni ni shilingi 500 ndio unauza na.
Latal tinga inyangunye tana ndangera.
Haitatosha chakula na mafuta ya kununua na mafuta ya generator ya kupata maji.
Kore nare.
Ya pili.
Kia tal tinga sola.
Boho liko na sola.
Na kia ta sola chida.
Na sola uvunjika, uharibika mara nyingi.
Meata ngara na itei.
Kwa hivyo inamaanisha kwamba hakuna maji.
Kiniara na jejer.
Ni ile maji kidogo kama thread.
Walikuwa wameweka fence. Sasa unaona fence hakuna kwa sababu ya watu kutoka nje, wanyama kuja kuharibu. Hata ile mfereji wanafungua wakati mwingi unakuta baada ya 3 months, 4 months tunabadilisha kwa sababu watu ndio wanakuja kuharibu. Security pia hakuna wakati mwingine. So watu wa nje wanakuja wanafunja kwa mawe. Watoto pia kitu kama hicho.
Mary Maro, unatembea kilomita ngapi kutoka hapa kuendea maji?
Kama kutoka mpaka Ijongoji kilomita chache kilomita ngapi?
Tamana.
Kumi.
Na hiyo maji inatosha?
Ama ni arketum, kitu mungai?
Kwa mahitaji yake ya kila siku?
Haitoshi.
Haitoshi. So lazima aende mara kama
ngapi naja?
2. Asubuhi na jioni ama? Okay.
Kalau terserah, pakai marata. Aku untuk kita korban itu tinggal saya paman, nanya itu tokal.
Asubuhi na jioni.
Okay.
Kordana itu kalau ikut neda, mata tesir nama.
Kama jaenda trip mbili, kesho asubuhi ana ya kutumia.
So 10 kilometers to and fro 2 times a day, that is about 40 kilometers to just get 2 jerrycans of water, which I'm also being told might be the only meal of the day. The acute food insecurity has made the nutrition situation for kids and lactating mothers, especially in Gas Center of Horsap County, worse. Community health volunteer Isako Dambala.
Hii watoto nikifika kwa hapa ni hatari. Ni mbaya kabisa. Nikifika hii na 12.2 ni OTB, ni SAP iko katikati. Ni kukuja hii iko sawa.
Hebu pima tuone sasa.
Jangan gede. Twelve point 10.7 ni OTP.
With support from various partners, the county government, through their integrated outreach program, have been able to reach these communities who can't be able to get to the health facilities. Kevin Wafula is a nurse at North Horsap County. He explains more on what they do during these outreach sessions.
As we come for outreach services, what we normally do, we mobilize the mothers to come together, and then after that, there is a health education which is given by the CHV for about 10 minutes, and then after the 10 minutes, what we do, there is a screening. Screening is we normally take all the under 5s together, and then we do the screening. In screening, we are identifying, we are categorizing children according to the nutritionally the criteria. That is the government policy. What we normally do, we screen all the children, and then the CHV screen them in assistance with the community health assistant who is around here, and then they bring them to the nurse who also acts as a nutritionist, and then we do what is called a Z-score. Z-score, it enables us to identify the children who are which will admit to the nutrition program, and those one will not admit to the nutrition program. After the admission to the nutrition program, after we have gotten the children who are admitting to the nutrition, the beneficiary, that is the mother, the mother is given a health education about the program that we are doing. We are admitting the child in either the outpatient therapeutic program, and then there is what is called supplementary feeding. For supplementary feeding, those are children who are not severely malnourished. But for therapeutics, those ones who are very severely malnourished. Yeah. And then after that, they are given education on how to partake the plumbinats, and then others they are taking plumbism. After that, we give them the TCA to come.
Working together with the county government, humanitarian organizations including Wealth, Hunger, Welfare and Concern Kenya are rehabilitating dilapidated boreholes and assisting communities, especially those living near satellite stations, set up kitchen gardens to supplement their mainstay, which is livestock.
Sisi tukiwa Rendile huwa tunapeleka tu mbuzi yetu na ng'ombe. Kwa Jilali hakuna maziwa ya kutosha. Wanadunga ng'ombe alafu wanakunya damu. Alafu tena ni wanachinja, wanakula nyama. Lakini mimi nilikuja kuona mambo ya shamba ni tofauti, kwa sababu ina chakula ile iko na afya kama spinach, nyanya, hizo green yote iko na faida kwa mwili ya binadamu. Ndengu niliona, ndengu ndio inahudumu sana kwa Jilali kwa hapa. Ni ile chakula inamea kwa Jilali, ndengu na kunde, na hata ile zingine kama sukuma, kama tuko na maji. Lakini shida ya hapa ni maji. Tangu nipate hii silanga, Weltanga ameniletea hilo nylon, nikapata maji. Ninaona saa hii inasaidia kwa sababu ninapanda hiyo sukuma yangu na ndengu na spinach na nyanya. Sasa vile niliona hiyo ndengu inafanya kazi, hiyo ukikausha unakaa kwa muda, hawezi haribika na iko na afya.
So far, we have seen the reward of our efforts since they can access vegetables in their farm and gotten an extra coin. Since our neighbors are not part of the group, whenever they need vegetarian, they would always buy the vegetables from that farm.
We provide farm inputs to some of these households who have areas which have agricultural potentiality to produce food. But in such a setup, we normally give cash transfers to these households. And we have a project which we are about to start, which targets cash transfers. So we'll get households which are really affected by this drought. I know all of them are affected, but we'll isolate households which are deeply affected, and we will provide them with cash transfers. We are also anticipating in that project, we are also doing destocking, where we'll get animals that are really macheted, and we'll ask the beneficiaries to mobilize such goats. They bring with those goats, they slaughter. The ones that are fit for human consumption, they will eat, and then we'll provide them with some cash just to make them move on between now and when we expect the long rains in April.
County authorities as well as humanitarian organizations have always sensitized the locals to minimize the size of their herds through destocking to reduce mortality rates during such times.
So it's about 8 o'clock in the morning, and you can see the sun is already up and shining. We are on our way to Maikona, crossing the Chalbi Desert from Kalacha. And lucky for us, we have some modern four-wheel drives that are air-conditioned. But I can't help imagine the stress that these communities go through crossing over this vastness with their malnourished children and livestock.
The leaders plus other stakeholders have always been sensitizing, telling them the dangers of putting all the eggs in one basket. They have always been telling them as much as possible they must have savings, so that if you have 300 goats during the rain season and their body conditions are okay, if you will sell 100 of them and put that saving in your bank account, I'm sure during a drought like this one, you will not have a lot of pressure. Leaders, stakeholders, all forms of other agencies have been sensitizing them on this. This idea of the local media telling them of poor rains to be received has always helped them to have some preparedness. I'm sure if they will not have adhered to that, today you will not have, you have seen some people are quite healthy in gas. Most of them have been adhering to this. But you see, when you give information, maybe some percentage you'll take that information, others won't. So they have started having some knowledge of making sure that they convert their livestock into some savings and engagement in some other forms of business.
Climate change creates both risk and opportunities. By understanding, planning for and adapting to a changing climate, individuals and societies can take advantage of opportunities and reduce risks. Winners will be those who are prepared for change and know how to adapt.
We're in emergency phase. Globally, WHO states that 15% global acute malnutrition is an emergency phase, but we're already seeing, areas of North Hore, areas of Marsabit County in Eldoret. We have global acute malnutrition rates of around 46%. So that means 46% of those children are malnourished. So yeah, we're having a dire need to be able to respond and support those families and those children directly. I think also we have the situation where communities are eating one meal a day, and the diversity of that food is not giving them the calorie intake that they need. So also we're having the adverse effect where people are not able to produce food. If we talk about maize production, which is a common staple food here in Kenya, in the southeastern provinces, in the coastal areas, we're seeing around 70% depletion in harvest and production of maize in those areas, and I think that's just heading towards the fact that Kenya is not able to feed its own population. People are suffering because they're not able to produce.
The effects that we're experiencing are the results of decades of climate change that has been happening, some of it that are driven by conscious actions that the human population is taking. Some of it is not necessarily intentional actions, but these are things that we cannot just wake overnight and decide to reverse or decide to stop. We can stop the current drivers, but to reverse the effect and the impact of the climate change needs a really well thought out structure, a really well thought out processes, and a very long-term funded situation. This is government funding, this is also humanitarian funding, as well as private sector funding to support communities that have been affected over time, to reestablish their resilience, to reestablish their coping capacities against the climate change, to also determine a situation of new normal. In 2012-2013, we had some estimates from FAO that by 2050, most countries, including Kenya, will have seen an almost 50% increase of the population. And at that time, we'll also have seen a significant reduction in the land that can produce food. So we have more mouths to feed and less ability to produce food.
To add salt to injury, the recent rains, which were supposed to be a sigh of relief, came with bad luck. These are recent images of thousands of dead sheep and goats in different sub-counties of Marsabit County that were struck by hypothermia.
Despite all this, you gotta admire the resilience of these communities. I mean, these are some of the harshest environments you could live in. You've got temperatures soaring to over 40 degrees Celsius during the day. You've got the rocky, bare terrain where almost nothing grows. And the wind gusts. Sometimes you can't even hear yourself talk. And it is high time that the relevant authorities came up with permanent solutions for these recurrent effects of drought.